Thank you. We will now be joined by the co-chairs of the Civil Rights Task Force of the Congressional Black Caucus. In this order, we would have Representative John Conyers and Representative John Lewis.
When I first came to Congress, I went immediately to the Speaker of the House, John McCormick, and asked to go on the Judiciary Committee. And the reason, as he and I both knew, was the Civil Rights Act that was so important. But today, Citizens United has been eclipsed by the decision in the United States versus Shelby and Holder. This case takes us back to the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which didn't give African Americans the right to vote. And then we went into 1869 when the 15th Amendment did give African Americans the right to vote. And then with the 24th Amendment, poll taxes were outlawed in 1964. And then in 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law, permanently barring barriers to political participation by racial and ethnic minorities, prohibiting any election practices that deny the right to vote, and requiring jurisdictions with a history of discrimination in voting to get federal approval before the changes in election laws can take effect. And what the Supreme Court has done with the ruling that was issued only hours ago is to obliterate that collection of jurisdictions that were under review. And so the Voting Rights Act, signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965, then by President Nixon, President Ford, President Reagan, and President Bush have all signed them. And this is what makes the bipartisanship of where we dust ourselves off and start all over again become so important. We can rise to this challenge. We don't have any alternative. And it is up to us to see that we remedy this in as meaningful, as fair a manner as possible. There were members on the Supreme Court that wanted to take out Section 5 while we were at it. And I can't remember who it was that restrained that from coming in too, but our job is big enough as it is. This is a day from which we will be planning, strategizing, working with both bodies of the legislature, and of course everyone in every party to get this right. It's been done before. We've faced challenges like these, but the Voting Rights Act must be continued. I haven't heard anybody say yet that we don't need it. Obviously, the record is replete with those that have been challenged or actions taken that have prevented it from happening. And so I join these members, of which we are only a small number, but I think that we're up to the task. We've got to be up to the task. This may be the most important civil rights action that we take.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, the Supreme Court struck a dagger in the heart of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They're saying, in effect, that history cannot repeat itself, but I succumb and walk in my shoes. As Justice Ginsburg described in her dissent, the history is relevant because voting rights have been given in this country and they have been taken away. After the Civil War, slaves were given the right to vote by constitutional amendment. They were elected to Congress and served in this body. After a few short years later, those rights were nullified, and one of the worst, most brutal periods of discrimination and human and civil rights violation followed those decisions. It took exactly 100 years, from 1865 to 1965, to get those rights back. A nation turned a blind eye to legalize segregation and racial discrimination for 100 years. It took organizing people who feared for their lives. It took standing in unmovable lines. It took people struggling and dying for the right to vote. Just 49 years ago, 3 young men that I knew, on June 21st, 1964, Andy Goodman, Mickey Schreiner, and James Chaney went out to investigate an African-American church that was burning, a church that was being used for voter registration workshop. They were detained by the sheriff, later taken to jail, taken out of jail, beaten, shot, and killed by the Klan. We don't want to go back. We want to go forward. The only thing I did a few short years ago, I gave a little blood on that bridge where others, brothers and sisters of mine, and other people in the struggle gave their very lives. The record Congress produced demonstrated the clear need for voting rights protection in our country. Even the court did not deny that discrimination still exists. The American people should use the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington and other opportunities to say we still need voting rights protection in our country. They must compel each and every member of Congress to act in a bipartisan fashion to fix or repair for the Congress or the Supreme Court rather broke. We must do it. We must do it now before another national election takes place. It is our calling. It is our mission. It is our mandate, and we have an obligation to act.
Thank you. We're going to now be joined by 3 more members in this order: Terry Sewell from Alabama, Hank Johnson from Georgia, and Steve Cohen from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is indeed a sad day for our nation, but it's especially a sad day for my home state of Alabama. As a native of Selma, Alabama, and as the member that currently represents the Civil Rights District of Alabama, I can tell you that I know that the injustices suffered on that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday in 1965, has not been fully vindicated. I think it's ironic that the very state that caused us to get the Voting Rights Act is now being used by our Supreme Court to dismantle that very law. But I think that as long as there are facts like the facts in the Shelby County case, which so clearly demonstrate that there's so much work to be done, the fact of the matter is that without preclearance, Calera, the city of Calera, the county of Shelby, redrew the lines such that an African-American city council member would lose. And the discriminatory effect was that he lost. He lost that election. This wasn't in 1965. This wasn't in 1970 or 1980. This was in my lifetime. This was but a few years ago. I think it's unacceptable. And as long as there are voters whose rights need to be protected, there is a need for the Voting Rights Act. Now, we in Congress have an opportunity to develop another coverage formula. But I can tell you that whatever coverage formula that is developed, I can't imagine that my state, Alabama, would not continue to fall under it. It's disheartening for me because I know that so much progress has taken place, but the unfortunate reality is there's still so much work to be done. I look forward to joining with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get that work done so that the effects of Section 5 will continue to be available. I would have never thought that I, a beneficiary of the civil rights movement, would be on a stage today with John Lewis, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, and so many of my colleagues, fighting still for the protections of the fundamental right to vote. The right to vote is sacred, and we who are in Congress, Republican and Democrat, should be fighting for that right, not looking to restrict it. And the very fact that in this past election we had 38 states, including Alabama, that had voter ID laws looking to restrict people's right to vote. We have to stand up. We have to stand up. And I look forward to joining my colleagues in standing up for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and for the protections of minority rights.
Joined by Emmanuel Cleaver from Missouri. Ms. Cleaver.
This will be short. The fact that the Supreme Court did the wrong thing should inspire Congress to do the right thing. In August, we will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Please understand this. This time, it will not just be predominantly black. This time, we will have the rainbow of this coalition here in Congress. This time, we will have Republicans, Democrats, and the sons and daughters of the Dixiecrats. People who are for right are going to come here to Washington because what was done today was wrong, and the people of this country, the good and decent people of this country, need to speak out.
Mr. Vesey from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And wanted to be clear, I know that the Supreme Court has said that there's no need for the Voting Rights Act today. Is basically what they summed up. And what I would say is, look at Texas. I'm from Texas. I represent Fort Worth, Arlington, and Dallas. And 2 Republican judges. It was a 3-judge panel because Texas wanted to bypass the Justice Department to get our maps pre-cleared and to pass a discriminatory voter ID law. The majority of the court on this Republican-dominated panel said that the discrimination that happened in Texas redistricting and voter ID was blatantly discriminatory. And that's enough said. If they had taken the Texas case and rolled it in with the Shelby case, it's hard to believe that they could have reasonably came up with the same conclusion. And I want to echo what my colleagues have said. This is a very sad day in America because we have taken a step backwards as it relates to civil rights and as it relates to justice in this country. But like we have overcome bad Supreme Court decisions in the past, we can have Congress balance this out. And so now is the time for us to act and do the right thing and restore equality and justice for all Americans. Thank you.
Again, thank you.
To try to continue to uphold some of these measures.
Well, I'm going to let my colleague from Alabama speak to the specifics of it, but let me just say this to the senator whom I respect greatly. You can have your own opinion, as they say, but you can't have your own facts. And the fact is that Shelby County, in fact, has had a history of discrimination. And certainly I would say that if what they want us to do is march again, we are up to the task. I certainly do believe that the President and the White House and every person of goodwill in this country has an obligation to do their part to see that this is corrected.
Well, I just have to say that with all due respect to my senator, whom I respect a lot, the reality is that the Shelby County case was an overt example of racial discrimination. The reality is that in the Calera City Council, this was an incumbent black elected official who was redistricted out of his seat, and he lost re-election. So with all due respect, I think that while much progress has happened in our state, and I'm proud of the progress that we've made in our state, I think this very case, ironically, is, to me, was a very bad case to actually have overturned Section 4 and thus nullify Section 5. Look, those of us who love the state of Alabama like we have to claim our painful past for what it was. It was because of our painful past that we had a civil rights movement, a voting rights movement, which ultimately led to a global human rights movement. But the reality is, progress has been made, but decisions like today have eroded those progress and set us back. And so I look forward, and I'm sure that many in the state of Alabama look forward to getting the protections, the full protections of the Voting Rights Act.
Could I just... I was born in Alabama. I lived in Alabama most of my young life. I saw the sign that said white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored women. In Alabama, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, black people and white people could sit together in a bus station, a ride together in a taxi cab. We had to change that. I stood with people in those unmovable lines in Selma, Alabama. People who had to go up a set of steps, go through double doors, and get a so-called literacy test. Teachers, college professors, lawyers, and doctors. And they were told they could not read or write well enough. They failed the so-called literacy test. And they were not able to register to vote until after the Voting Rights Act was passed and signed into law on August 6, 1965. It is still needed today in Alabama and throughout the 11 states of the old Confederacy and other parts of our country. But after Martin Luther King Jr. had received the Nobel Peace Prize in November 1964, he came back to America, had a meeting with President Lyndon Johnson at the White House, and told the president, so we need a Voting Rights Act. And Dr. King said, Mr. President, we need a Voting Rights Act. And the president said, we don't have the votes in the Congress to get a Voting Rights Act passed. I just signed a Civil Rights Act. And then President Johnson said, make me do it. Make me do it. And that's what the American people must make us do it.
Yeah.
And we will do it.
And, the other thing, I think it's history is one thing, but, to look back and try to decide why something wasn't done, I mean, who knows? Why wasn't immigration done when George Bush was president? Why didn't we have a jobs bill when the Republicans took over the House? Why don't we do a lot of things? We do them, as my colleague has said, because we are now forced to do it. And, some of us say it's a dysfunctional body, and to some people it may be. But just like most people, we do things when they are necessary to be done, and now is the time to take care of voting rights. Yes.
Chief Justice John Roberts focused on the fact that he said
it best. This is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is an issue for people in America. This isn't an American issue. And so we want to be sure that every single person in this country has the constitutional right so that to have their voices heard. And we have our voices heard by our vote. So we thank you all for coming, and I thank my colleagues for being here as well.